I guess where the distinction in my mind, at least for myself, which is really like ultimately that's the only call I get to make, is like what's best for me. What am I comfortable with? It would be insane to try to get on stage without, like, for me at this point, it would be very reckless to try to get on stage without the use of enhancements. But with respect to that, there's certainly a more intelligent way to go about using them, and there's the less intelligent way. And then there's the gray area in between that's like, hey, are you close to making a run at the Olympia? Are you like actually just a point away? And this actually, this is something I want to mention, because like my last prep, working with John, I did the Night of Champions. I was way too lean, and I'm not disappointed with that showing, because really that was I was turning a page. Like I was essentially self-coaching. Like John was my second eye, but frankly, it was a lot of it myself. I was doing it differently, like from a drug perspective. When I was with Shane, yeah, we used drugs. We used different drugs. So going about it a more intelligent way, I'm like, okay, am I satisfied with my ability to get conditioned? Yes. Did the fat loss agents work? Yes. Having TRT in place, did it help from an anti-catabolic standpoint? Yes. Did I expose myself, this going into Night of Champions, did I expose myself unnecessarily to risk of virilization? No. So for me, getting on stage, even like, it's John Jewett, of course, like people are like, who is telling you this is bikini? I'm like, it's John Jewett, like, and me too, like me equally, like, yeah, this is good, right? It's not something I'm like, it's not something I'm sour about. I'm like, it got really fucking lean, and like, it was cool. Like I do like a leaner look. That's not conducive with a better placing on stage. So when I placed, I got 7th at Night of Champions. I was like, it was okay, but I was also like, yeah, still glutes are not there. They're just not as big, and like, okay, cool. But our debrief around this, because I had another show planned, what was it? At the Miami Muscle. That was the next one I was going to do. And then we agreed. We're like, okay, like I wasn't 3rd. I wasn't even 5th. Like I wasn't in that realm of discussion. Like I was second call outs for sure. Good, very good at the pro level. I'm very happy. Like there's no like self-deprecate, like it's a very good placing. But John and we were very like clear about, okay, I'll do the Miami Muscle. Depending on how I do, like it probably is time to shut down the season, just because like extending that. And I guess I should back up, like go after Night of Champions, we agreed, we're like, okay, it does make sense to put in a little bit of Anavar, because there is a fullness that I'm lacking that will not be achieved by just simply filling out. We'll bring a fuller look, we'll up food, we'll do just a very like predictable like filling out process. I ended up not doing the Miami Muscle because I think like literally the day of, like the flight itself was canceled. I forget if there was like storms in LA or storms in Miami, but I know a lot of people, there were people who were like redirected. And when I looked at flights, the only ones that were available, they had like layovers in like Texas and Denver, but it was at a ridiculous time. Like it would put me getting in like the day before the show. So like, I remember the logic of it. Like I, talked to Patrick about it, talked to John. I'm like, I'm not going to sacrifice everything I just did. Also spend a shit ton of money trying to get on a new flight. When I had my flight, I'm not going to sacrifice like all the work I've done to have a bad showing on account of travel. Like that's not how I've done everything so predictable at this point that I'm not going to have a showing that isn't representative of my best. I know there's a girl I was supposed to compete with, I think Lizzie, who we were like messaging, and she's like, yep, got like a layover. So I feel like it was like Dallas or somewhere. And she ended up like having to stay the night there. It was a long time ago. Her and her husband may have drove, but it was so many additional hurdles to go through. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So the following weekend was the Mile High. I'm like, easy. Okay, that's one more week. Another week I can try to drop off some fatigue, but also at that time I was pretty run down. I was like, I want to get on stage one more time, but like I'm also pretty done. Like I'm not going to see out this season again under the guise that like we put Anavar in place. It did help my overall look. I looked really fucking full. We pushed food up, but even then, like the fullness that I achieved, like it was not sufficient to get a top placing. And granted, the next show, Mile High, I think I got 8th. I'm pretty sure it was 8th. The girls above me, like all of them were really competitive. And that was the thing. Like I wasn't close. It wasn't one of those things we could be, okay, well, we'll just leave Anavar in. We'll try to grow a little bit. And I remember I talked to John like on the way to the airport. Yeah, I think I flew home that night. I talked to John and he's like, yeah, like I'm glad we're on the same page. It's like we could keep the anabolic in place and try to manipulate some things, but like your threshold for improvement, we're pretty much at the upper end of that. Increasing Anavar isn't going to help. Like taking 6 weeks off, like you're not gonna grow. And also you're not in a position really to add like the tissue that you need. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And it was like that kindness and honesty from him, it meant a lot to me because like it was in his best interest to be like, yeah, continue, keep going. As it is most coaches, like I'm not saying every coach, there are a lot of shitty coaches out there though. You have to consider that like the hard thing for a coach to do is to tell you that like, now it's a wrap. Like we can't really squeeze out anything more here at this time. And like from a business perspective, like it actually, okay, now for them to be in the same position again, they have to go through probably another prep with you or with someone else. And I was talking about this morning with Muscle Bill. I was like, yeah, like that kindness, that selflessness, that like care from someone, I really valued that. And that's honestly, it's a big reason that like, as I coach, I'm like, okay, like someone wants to get on stage, cool. Before the placing, like I'm not trying to be, before the placing, it comes down to like, what is best for this individual? If this was me, what kind of considerations would I want someone to make? How do I operate in a way that really considers what's best for them? Not just now, not just like, because some people are like, hey, I want to do this show. It's like 1 or 2 weeks away. Can we do it? Or it's like 4 weeks away. Actually, no, the big one that's like hard to explain that I get pretty often is with prep clients. They'll do a show and they'll be like, okay, what about a national show here in 3 months? I'm like, like they just did a national show and they're like, okay, what about this one in 3 months? I'm like, you weren't close. Like with Tate, fuck, like that was long. That was like 8 weeks. And like, I mean, she fucking tolerated that. Like, I mean, we brought her out of a deficit, tried to build a little bit, but like, it was a lot to ask. She was so close to her pro card at her first national show that we did together. She made big improvements. Then we went to the one after that and it was like, despite big improvements, despite it being her best look, it was still, it's like, it's just the way the cards fall sometimes. And I think in this sport, it's very easy to feel as if you only have this one shot and like you've worked so hard, let's just push a little bit more. I get it because I have that same urge. I have that same tendency to be like, come on, like what's one more? But like, even just with my athlete, Talia, like we're at that final week. Like she's going to compete next weekend in Korea. She looks incredible, but like we're both very clear, like even if there are more shows after this, it's not in her best interest. It's not going to serve her. Like she's done so well this season and she's made big improvements from last season, and we're doing things with her health and her longevity in the sport because she's young. I'm like, we're doing things in a very respectable way. And that's really like my mission is like, if we had to lay out the whole prep, if I had to demonstrate and like present this to someone else and justify like my decision making, reasons for including different enhancements in and out of prep, would any part of me be like, yeah, I know? would any part of me feel bad or be like, yeah, that was like a little aggressive? I would rather, like, looking back at my career, like when I started and like the shows I've done, I've been so fortunate that I've had so many people in my corner. I mean, like even Shane, like he was never like a pusher. Like he never was like, you have to take, and like, I didn't take Clen then because I didn't know that it was like pretty reasonable. Took fucking Nolvadex. Like I made decisions like it was completely like consensual. Like, but even then, like there was not a push from him to be like, you must take like these. Pretty sure I was on 2.5 of Anavar. Like, I mean, it wasn't much. It's not to say that's everyone's experience. It's just to say that like the context around these drugs and the context around why people make decisions around what to take, it's multifaceted. And I feel confident in saying a lot of the times these decisions, athletes aren't advocating what they really want. They might be focusing, or maybe they're focusing exclusively on the performance and like how they place on stage. And that to me is like, it's scary. It's scary because even if we put the drug in place, even if it does make a difference, you still might not win. And like, if the likelihood of you winning is already uncertain, which it always is, look at these pros. Like, I mean, like you fucking see these girls competing like so many shows back to back. And like, Ashley's a great example that like, I mean, she does objectively so well on stage, but there are shows she doesn't win at. I mean, she takes it on the chin. She's like, yep, and on to the next one. This is why I do the sport, because I like competing, and like the placing itself does not keep me in the sport. She's hella competitive, like both as an athlete, but then also I think my perception is her mindset around competing is very competitive. But I think when you go in with this like qualifier of like, okay, I'm going to take a higher risk if it reduces that certainty of not winning, sure. But if all of your actions, all of your behaviors are under that principle, under that like, okay, here's the condition, it'll reduce or I guess increase my chance of winning. Yeah, but at a certain point, that's just not true. Like there's a ceiling for which it actually does. And I guess like I don't want to say my issue, because frankly, I don't give a fuck. It's not my business. It's not my business what other people take. It's not my business how they take it. What I'm responsible for are the people like who I work with, who I advise to on, and then obviously like my own use. Like that's what I'm responsible for. And if I have a say in it, I'm going to lean towards the likelihood of it not making a difference. Unless there's like very good evidence to suggest otherwise, which sometimes there has been, but most of the time there's not. Most of the time, the gap that we're trying to close from an athlete, maybe you, the listener, maybe the gap we're trying to close, like, fuck, there's a girl last year who like I did a consult with, no, I did a coaching call with, and she was telling me how her coach like continued to increase her Anavar up and up until she was at 20 milligrams. And I'm like, for a national show, like it didn't work at 10. 10 didn't close the gap for you. And like you did one national show at 5, you went up to 10 for the next one, 15, 20. And I'm like, oh, like, where's the cutoff? And like, I mean, besides the point, like I followed her career and I'm like, you weren't even conditioned. Like, sorry, but your conditioning was not there. With her, I like specifically was like, man, that's such a shame, because like you continue with that justification, and maybe there is a rationale, but you continue with rationalizing every decision. And now this isn't decision making. This isn't logical. This begins to look more and more like an emotional decision. And maybe to what cost? I mean, maybe whatever, you turn pro and like you didn't realize, you're like, cool, got away with it. But I don't like setting that as an example. I think that's a really poor example to set for everyone.